most people won't believe this story. It's as true as me writing it on Reddit. 30 years ago, 1994, when my friends and I were all 16, we solved a murder. I've changed the name of the perpetrator because I really don't want to be known where I live for privacy reasons. The Waffle House was our haven. We were 4 teens: Gemma, Caleb, Jamie, and me, Taylor. Every Friday night, after the football games and the endless small-town boredom, we'd pile into the corner booth, sipping milkshakes and debating the dumbest topics like who'd win a fight, Superman or Batman, all at our local Waffle House. It wasn't just a place to eat. It was our escape, our sanctuary, the one place where we felt like everything or anything could happen. We didn't know just how true that was until the night it all went wrong. It was a crisp autumn evening, I remember. The air smelled like wood smoke and syrup. Gemma was teasing Caleb about his latest crush when a man stumbled in. His name was Gerald, though we didn't know it at the time. He looked disheveled, his face pale and drawn like he'd seen a ghost, or maybe he was the ghost. He sat at the counter, muttering to himself, gripping a coffee cup like it was his lifeline. Jamie, ever so bold, whispered, "That guy's giving off major psycho vibes." We laughed, but something about him stuck with me. The way his hands trembled, the way his eyes darted around the room like he was searching for someone, or running from someone. As we were leaving, we overheard him. He wasn't exactly quiet, and his words hit us like a freight train as he whispered to himself, "I didn't mean to kill her, but she wouldn't shut up. I had no choice." We froze. My heart pounded as I glanced at the others. Gemma's face was pale. Caleb looked like he was about to puke, and Jamie, she was already pulling out what was her lifeline, and popular back then, a recorder bought from Radio Shack to record him. "What do we do?" I whispered. "We figure this out," Jamie said, her voice steady. "We can't just let it go. She got the recording. I mean, he was sitting right next to us." The next week was a whirlwind. We spent our free time digging. Gemma, the tech wizard, hacked into local news archives. Caleb talked to anyone who would listen, his charm disarming even the grumpiest of adults. Jamie and I scooped out Gerald's rundown house on the edge of town. What we found was chilling. Bloodstains on the floor, a bracelet we later confirmed belonged to a missing waitress from the diner across town, the diner we frequented. The police didn't take us seriously at first, just kids with imaginations, they said. But when we handed over the bracelet and Jamie's recording, they couldn't ignore us anymore. Gerald was arrested within a week. During the trial, he confessed to murdering the waitress Rachel, who ironically worked at the same Waffle House we frequented. After an argument turned violent, he snapped. He claimed he never meant to kill her, but his remorse didn't save him from a life sentence. We felt like heroes. Justice had been served and we'd played a part. But life moved on. We graduated, went to college, started families. Jamie became a journalist, Caleb a teacher, and Gemma a police officer. As for me, I became a private investigator, inspired by the events of that fateful year. I love my job and am grateful to work with Gemma on a lot of cases. We rarely talked about it though, the horror of it all, the fear of what could have happened if Gerald had noticed us that night, lingering like a shadow. 30 years later. It was a quiet morning when I read about it. I was sipping my coffee, flipping through the newspaper when the words Gerald, last name, parole hearing jumped out at me. My stomach turned. 30 years had dulled the edges of those memories, but the fear came rushing back like it was yesterday. I called Gemma and Caleb immediately. Jamie had passed away a few years ago, cancer, and her loss still ached like an old wound. Her mother, Miss Amy, answered my call with surprising determination. "We're not letting him out," she said firmly. "Jamie fought too hard for justice. We owe it to her, and to Rachel. Rachel's the woman that was killed." The parole hearing was tense. Gerald was older, his hair gray, and his once intimidating frame was now frail. But his eyes, they were the same cold, calculating ones I remembered. He spoke of remorse, of finding God, of being a changed man. For a moment I almost believed him, but then I saw the way he glanced at us, at me, Gemma, Caleb, and Miss Amy, and I knew. He hadn't changed. He was still a dangerous man who couldn't control his rage. When it was my turn to speak, I told the board everything. I described the night at the Waffle House, the fear in Rachel's eyes, and the photo her family had shared. The way Gerald had casually confessed to a murder like it was nothing. I begged them to keep him behind bars, not just for us, for anyone else who might cross his path. Miss Amy spoke last, her voice trembling but resolute. "He took my daughter's peace. He doesn't deserve freedom." The board denied his parole, but the relief was temporary. Gerald would be up for parole again in 5 years, 2029, and I knew he wouldn't forget us. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. We'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. As I looked at my friends, older, grayer, but still the same people who had fought for justice all those years ago, I felt a spark of hope. We weren't those scared kids anymore. We were stronger, smarter, and we had each other. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. I'll give an update in 5 years. The house on Maplewood Lane had been our dream come true. My husband and I had spent years saving and searching for the perfect home, and this one checked every box. It had a spacious backyard for the kids to run around, a cozy fireplace for family nights, and a kitchen large enough for the chaos that comes with 3 growing children. Even our dog Max seemed to approve, bounding happily through the rooms as soon as we moved in. To top it all off, we had the best neighbors anyone could ask for. They had kids around the same ages as ours, and their easygoing, warm demeanor made the transition into the neighborhood seamless. Barbecues, game nights, and spontaneous driveway chats became staples of our lives. It felt like we were living in one of those perfect suburban movie scenes. But all good things, as they say, must come to an end. When the Martins announced they were moving, my heart sank. They had a job opportunity they couldn't pass up, and though we understood, the loss of their friendship left a void in our idyllic little world. A few weeks later, the new neighbors arrived, the Crawfords. From the start, things felt different. They were a couple without kids, and their sleek black SUV and perfectly trimmed hedges gave off an air of rigid perfection. They kept to themselves at first, which was fine by us, but soon their presence became impossible to ignore. It started with the noise. Late-night arguments echoed from their house, the harsh tones cutting through the otherwise quiet neighborhood. Then came the complaints about Max barking when the mailman arrived, about the kids' bikes left momentarily on the sidewalk, and even about the faint smell of our weekend barbecues wafting into their yard. "You'd think we moved into their neighborhood," my husband muttered one evening as we watched Max stare at the Crawfords' yard, his ears pinned back. The final straw came when they reported us to the HOA for having unapproved decorations on our porch. Our beloved string lights and hanging flower baskets, which had been there since we moved in. I longed for the Martins more than ever, their laughter, their generosity, their easy way of making everything feel better. The Crawfords had turned what was once a haven into a source of stress. But then something unexpected happened. One crisp Saturday morning, Max bolted out of the backyard, barking furiously. My heart raced as I ran after him, terrified he might have escaped onto the busy street. But no, he had stopped, standing firmly in between the Crawfords' house and our property line. "What is it, boy?" I asked, my voice trembling. And then I saw it, a young boy, no older than 8, peeking out from behind the Crawfords' hedges. His face was pale, his eyes were wide. He wasn't theirs, and something about the way he clutched his knees to his chest made me pause. The Crawfords emerged moments later, their stern expressions softening when they saw the boy. "This is our nephew, Liam," Mrs. Crawford explained, awkwardly. "We're his guardians now." In that moment, something shifted. Behind their stiff exteriors were 2 people who were clearly struggling, not just with parenting, but with life itself. Over time, things began to change. We offered to help with Liam, inviting him over to play with our kids. My husband and I found moments of common ground with the Crawfords. They even attended one of our barbecues, awkward smiles slowly giving way to genuine ones. It wasn't the same as having the Martins next door, but life on Maplewood Lane was never meant to stay static. Slowly, we began to find a new rhythm, one filled with its own brand of chaos, but also kindness and understanding. And Max, ever the protector, kept watch over it all. It was a Saturday afternoon when the news broke, and to be honest, I didn't see it coming. My brother Nate had been dating Emma for 3 years by then. To the outside world, and even to most of us, they were the perfect couple. She was vibrant, charming, and the type of person who could light up a room with her laugh. Nate, he was head over heels, practically worshiping the ground she walked on. But that day changed everything. Nate stormed into my house, his face pale and his fists clenched. I was in the kitchen trying to wrangle the kids and keep the dog from stealing the food off the counter. "She cheated on me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What?" I froze, the spatula in my hand dripping pancake batter onto the floor. I glanced at my wife, who was sitting at the table with our youngest. Her eyes widened and she mouthed, "What's going on?" "She cheated," he repeated louder this time, his voice cracked. "I found out last night. She admitted it." I could tell he was on the verge of breaking, so I sent the kids upstairs and gave the dog a quick pat before sitting him down. "What happened?" I asked carefully. It turned out Emma had been seeing someone from her gym for months. Nate found out by accident, an out-of-place message on her phone that she couldn't explain away. He confronted her, and after hours of denial, she confessed. She told him she didn't mean to hurt him, that it was a mistake. But that wasn't the part that crushed him. The part that gutted him was realizing she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was only sorry she got caught. Nate moved in with us that night. He couldn't stand being in the apartment they had shared, and I couldn't blame him. At first he tried to keep to himself, but I made a point to pull him into the chaos of my life. Whether it was helping with school pickups or walking the dog, I didn't let him wallow for too long. But the cheating didn't just hurt Nate, it ripped through our entire family. My wife, Jenna, who'd been close friends with Emma, was devastated. She felt betrayed, too. I overheard her crying one night after Nate had gone to bed. She told me it felt like she'd lost a sister. Our parents were furious. My mom, always one to keep the peace, couldn't stop ranting about Emma every time she called. My dad, who rarely showed emotion, quietly reached out to Nate more often, offering support in his stoic way. But Nate, he wasn't okay. He quit his job a month after the breakup. Said he couldn't focus, couldn't keep up. It was like the betrayal had cracked open something inside him. He started drinking more than he should have, staying out late and crashing on my couch most nights. It was hard to see him like that. My big brother, the guy I always looked up to, now so broken. Then came the turning point. One evening, about 6 months after everything went down, I found Nate sitting on my back porch, a beer in hand, and the dog curled up at his feet. "I don't think I know who I am anymore," he admitted. I didn't know what to say. "You're Nate," I finally said. "You're my brother, my kid's favorite uncle, the guy who once taught me how to drive stick and didn't yell when I stalled out 50 times. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound, but at least it was a start. "Yeah, but who am I without her?" "You're more than her," I said firmly. "You just forgot for a while." That night, we made a pact. He'd start rebuilding, piece by piece, and I'd be there every step of the way. Over the next year, everything changed. Nate started therapy, which I'll admit I didn't think he'd ever do. He got a new job, something completely different from his old one, and started volunteering at local shelters on weekends. Slowly but surely, he found his way back to himself. The ripple effect of Emma's betrayal didn't stop there. Watching Nate's resilience inspired Jenna and me to take stock of our own lives. We started to make more time for each other, for the kids, for the things that mattered. I had always thought our marriage was solid, but seeing what Nate went through reminded me not to take anything for granted. Even the kids noticed the changes. My oldest, who adored Nate, started looking up to him even more. "Uncle Nate's so strong," he said one night. "He's like a superhero." I smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, he really is." Emma's betrayal could have destroyed Nate, and by extension of all of us. But in a strange way, it became the catalyst of something better. Nate found himself, our family grew closer, and I learned that even in the darkest moments, that's a chance to rebuild, to grow, to become something stronger. Life isn't perfect. It never will be. But now, every time I see Nate laughing with my kids or playing fetch with the dog in the yard, I'm reminded of one thing. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to us can lead to the best version of ourselves.